Our guest tonight is one of the world's foremost authorities on unidentified flying objects. He is the writer of the book, The UFO Experience, and he is the chairman of the Department of Astronomy at Northwestern University, Dr. J. Allen Hynek.
I was to those things right down there. I had the distinct privilege of meeting you about a couple years ago, year and a half ago.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And so much has happened, I suppose, and it's one of the most discussed subject matters. The book, by the way, UFO Experience, is absolutely fascinating. I read it a little while ago. What is a UFO? Because I think that's preferred over flying saucer.
You know, I really wonder why you have me on this program. You're the mentalist. You should tell me.
Oh, my gosh. No.
Well, of course, the U in UFO means unidentified. And I think right in the beginning we ought to have clear that we're not talking about the identifiable things. I have a few identifiable ones right along. Could I show you one right now?
These are identifiable, Doctor.
Oh, yeah, these are identifiable.
Which camera, right
why
here?
Don't you...
All right.
The way you want.
What is this?
This is a searchlight, you see, that's playing on the clouds at night, and it's a very obvious thing. I mean, it wouldn't fool anybody, but sometimes it's been reported as a UFO. And here is a cloud, a lenticular...
You know, I would never know that it was a cloud.
That's just a cloud. It's common in the western part of the United States. It's a lenticular cloud.
Yes, I see.
And here's another identified one. Sometimes we get hoaxes, you know.
Yes, yes.
And this is a slightly out-of-focus photograph of a banana split sundae.
You are kidding me. Oh, my gosh. That is...
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the ones that you might say stump the experts.
And offer no available information in light of present knowledge.
This is right. They're really mysteries.
Tell me, what percentage? It's a small percentage. Of course, if it were only 2, it would be significant, I think, and I think you'd probably feel that way.
It's more than 2. Then.
It's more than 2 out. I mean, 2 out of all the. What percentage would you say are really UFOs of all the sightings?
Well, about 20% actually of all the ones that we've had in the Air Force. You know, of course.
You mentioned the Air Force now.
I was scientific consultant to the Air Force for 20 years. In fact, I got into it because I was an astronomer. The Air Force needed an astronomer to weed out the meteors, the twinkling stars, and things like that. And we found that about 30% could be explained that way. And another 50% or so could be explained as aircraft, balloons, and so forth. But there was this hardcore residue of 15 to 20%.
That high.
That just couldn't be explained.
What is it that we keep hearing about? You had mentioned it in your book that it was a common theory, swamp gases. Is that a significant explanation for a certain percentage?
No,
it is not.
No, it isn't. That was a very...
And we've been told that it is by some so-called, authorities.
Well, this was a... You got me on the spot there because I was the one who perpetrated that thing.
You're kidding me.
Way back in Michigan, in Hillsdale, Michigan.
Yes.
I, at that time, simply said that since the lights were seen over a swamp, I said, well, one possible explanation was that this could be swamp gas. But the reporters underlined swamp gas and ran off to the telephones. Yeah. And I think any time after that, if a UFO had been seen in the Sahara Desert, it would have been called swamp gas, you see.
I think some of us who followed this whole phenomena became interested in the Condon report, I guess, which is how many years ago that it reached a fruition, or did it reach a climax?
It was issued in 1969.
It seems more recent, yeah. And what was the conclusion, and what's your feeling about that?
Well, my feeling is that the Condon report was a travesty on science.
Yeah.
It just simply was... the methods used. In fact, Dr. Condon didn't investigate one case.
He didn't?
No. Personally, he never investigated a single case.
And yet they came out negative, but you don't feel they presented a fair picture?
Well, actually, if you read the report from cover to cover, and that's difficult because it's 947 pages.
Sounds like the Warren Commission.
Yeah, you'll realize that there's a very real problem there because the Condon Committee was unable to explain 1/4 of the cases that were submitted, that they studied.
I'm curious, and I think everyone is now thinking the obvious question. How did they handle that in their report, the ones they couldn't explain?
Well, very nicely and very adroitly, is the word, Dr. Condon wrote the summary and completely neglected the contents of the report.
Oh, well, I remember reading in the prologue of this book a quote of William James, a great psychologist, which in essence said that even scientists are not too enthusiastic about accepting something that they don't understand. They're just not ready to. And I think if it were mainly, we couldn't explain most of it as hallucination, could we? Because there's too many physical evidences that are unexplainable.
Well, as a scientist, the ones that I've been studying are those that have physical evidence. For instance, the close encounters of the second kind that leave marks on the ground and stop cars and that sort of thing.
Stop cars?
Oh, yeah. There are hundreds of cases where, all over the world, you see, if these things didn't fit patterns, if each case were different from the next one, then there's no way of studying it. But when you get reports from Australia, Japan, France, northern Canada,
that say in essence what?
That give you the same pattern, then you have to say, well, either there's a virus going around that's causing everybody to become crazy at the same time, or there's something to it. Now, of course, remember that we're still talking about the unidentified ones, not the great majority, which can have perfectly natural explanations.
Yes.
So we must take that out before. Now there is since you are a mentalist, I'd like to start a foundation, the Hynek Foundation, for this investigation of the cases which I do not deal with generally, because they seem to have an element of the parapsychological in them. There's just no question that some of the reports seem to tell of the sort of thing that you find in poltergeist phenomena.
Really?
Things of that sort.
That's interesting. You know, when I first met Dr. Hynek, it was regarding the small percentage that could be mass hysteria or suggestibility. And even though I'm going to show something later on dealing with that factor, it could only explain a small percentage of really something that I think has to be opened again, reinvestigated, because the unknown is only unknown because at the moment we don't understand it. I thank you, Doctor, thank you for coming, and I'd like to have you back again to spend more time. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.